So, Trump and the Ukrainian president have their phone call in which Trump appears to condition military aid on a political favor. 90 minutes later, a Trump political appointee at the White House Budget Office emails the Pentagon, ordering them to withhold military aid. And in that email, that White House budget official writes, quote, "Given the sensitive nature of the request, I appreciate your keeping that information closely held to those who need to know to execute the direction," end quote. And here is where Richard Nixon and his reluctantly signed Impoundment Control Act come in. Because as we said, the White House is not allowed to impound money. They cannot stop or redirect money appropriated by Congress, and they definitely can't do it without notifying Congress. And these emails, pried loose by the Center for Public Integrity, added to the congressional testimony we already have from budget and Pentagon officials, show that career officials across the government were freaking out that they might be breaking the law. The political appointee in the White House Budget Office who sent that email to the Pentagon 90 minutes after Trump's phone call, his name is Michael Duffy. He previously ran the Wisconsin Republican Party. He's a political appointee. Mark Sandy, the top career official at the White House Budget Office, told lawmakers in closed-door testimony last month that as soon as Duffy ordered him to formally delay the Ukraine aid, Sandy immediately brought up the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. Sandy told his boss, basically, we need to talk to the lawyers. But in an unprecedented move, the political appointee, Duffy, took control of the process away from Sandy, the career official. Both Mark Sandy and a Pentagon official involved in discussions at the time testified to Congress that they repeatedly expressed their legal concerns to Duffy and urged him to talk to the general counsel, the lawyer, because they thought they were breaking the law. Mark Sandy also testified that two budget officials quit their jobs over their concerns about the legality of what they were doing, specifically over potential violations of the Impoundment Control Act. Now, your level of excitement about the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974 may vary. It is a decidedly unsexy title. But what is astounding here is that, A, this new evidence corroborates the narrative that Trump officials knew they were doing something wrong and quite possibly something illegal. And they were trying to keep the scheme quiet while ignoring warnings from career officials across the government. And B, we are continuing to get new evidence.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.